Question 1. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of unauthorized access to sensitive customer data due to vulnerabilities in data handling processes. The organization processes a significant volume of personally identifiable information, PI, and financial transaction details. Given the regulatory environment, what is the most appropriate strategy for implementing data encryption to mitigate this risk? Option A. Implement encryption solely for customer data while it is being transmitted across the network. Option B. Implement encryption only for customer data processed by the primary customer relationship management (CRM) application. Option C. Implement encryption solely for customer data when it is stored on servers and databases. Option D. Implement end-to-end encryption for all customer data, encompassing both data in transit and data at rest. The correct answer is D. Implement end-to-end encryption for all customer data, encompassing both data in transit and data at rest. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for certified security managers, CSM, where a critical business function, customer data processing, is exposed to a significant risk of unauthorized access due to inadequate encryption. The challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency, cost, and the imperative to protect sensitive information in compliance with regulatory mandates. The CSM must not only identify the risk, but also propose a technically sound and legally compliant solution that addresses the root cause without unduly disrupting business operations. The pressure to implement a solution quickly, coupled with potential budget constraints or resistance to change, adds to the professional complexity. Correct approach analysis. Implementing end-to-end encryption for all customer data, both in transit and at rest, is the correct approach. This aligns with the principles of data protection and privacy mandated by relevant regulations. Specifically, for a US-based context relevant to many CSM certifications, this would involve adherence to frameworks like HIPAA for health data, PCI DSS for payment card data, and general data privacy principles often reflected in state laws like the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA. End-to-end encryption ensures that data is protected from the moment it is created or collected until it is no longer needed, significantly reducing the attack surface and the likelihood of a data breach. This comprehensive approach directly mitigates the identified risk of unauthorized access by making the data unreadable to any unauthorized party, even if intermediate systems are compromised. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing encryption only for data in transit, while a good practice, is insufficient when the risk matrix highlights unauthorized access to data at rest. This approach fails to address the vulnerability of stored customer information, leaving it exposed to internal threats or direct system compromises. This would be a regulatory failure under most data protection laws, as they typically require protection of data throughout its life cycle, including when it is stored. Implementing encryption only for data at rest, without addressing data in transit, leaves customer data vulnerable during transmission. This could lead to interception and compromise by malicious actors on the network. This also represents a regulatory failure, as many data protection laws require secure transmission of sensitive data. Implementing encryption only for data processed by a specific application, while potentially addressing a subset of the risk, is an incomplete solution. The risk matrix indicates a broader vulnerability across customer data. Focusing on a single application ignores other points where data might be stored or transmitted, leaving significant gaps in the overall security posture and failing to meet the comprehensive protection expected by regulators. This selective approach is likely to be deemed inadequate by auditors and regulators. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such scenarios by first thoroughly understanding the identified risks and their potential impact, as presented in the risk matrix. This involves cross-referencing these risks with applicable regulatory requirements and industry best practices. The next step is to evaluate potential solutions based on their effectiveness in mitigating the identified risks, their feasibility in terms of implementation and cost, and their compliance with all relevant legal and ethical obligations. A comprehensive, layered security approach that addresses all facets of data protection, in transit, at rest, and in use, is generally preferred. When evaluating solutions, it is crucial to consider the principle of defense in depth and to ensure that no critical vulnerabilities remain unaddressed. Decision-making should be data-driven, risk-informed, and compliant with all legal and ethical frameworks. Question 2. Compliance review shows that the organization's security governance structure is perceived by various departments as being overly technical and disconnected from their operational realities, leading to inconsistent adoption of security policies. Which approach best addresses the establishment and maintenance of an effective security governance structure from a stakeholder perspective? Option A. Engage a third-party security consulting firm to design and manage the entire security governance framework, with minimal internal involvement beyond initial data provision. Option B. Delegate the sole responsibility for defining and managing the security governance framework to the IT security department, trusting their technical expertise to implement appropriate controls. Option C. Prioritize the reduction of security-related expenditures by implementing only the most cost-effective security solutions, regardless of their impact on operational risk. Option D. Form a cross-functional security governance committee comprising representatives from IT, legal, compliance, operations, and senior management to collaboratively define, implement, and oversee security policies and controls, ensuring alignment with business objectives and regulatory requirements. The correct answer is D. Form a cross-functional security governance committee comprising representatives from IT, legal, compliance, operations, and senior management to collaboratively define, implement, and oversee security policies and controls, ensuring alignment with business objectives and regulatory requirements. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the strategic objectives of the organization with the practical implementation of security controls, all while ensuring compliance with the relevant regulatory framework. The Certified Security Manager (CSM) certification implies adherence to a specific set of professional standards and potentially a defined jurisdiction's laws. Without a specified jurisdiction, we will assume a general best practice framework aligned with common international standards for security governance, such as ISO 27001 principles, which are often foundational for such certifications. The core challenge lies in effectively engaging diverse stakeholders, each with their own priorities and understanding of security, to foster a unified and effective security governance structure. The correct approach involves actively engaging all relevant stakeholders in the establishment and ongoing maintenance of security governance. This means understanding their perspectives, communicating the importance of security, and integrating their input into the governance framework. This collaborative approach ensures that security is not seen as an isolated IT function, but as a business enabler that is aligned with organizational goals. This aligns with ethical principles of transparency, accountability, and due diligence, and regulatory expectations that security programs must be comprehensive and supported by senior leadership and all relevant business units. An approach that focuses solely on the IT department's technical capabilities is incorrect because it fails to recognize that security is a business-wide responsibility. This siloed perspective can lead to a governance structure that is technically sound but lacks business buy-in, operational integration, and strategic alignment, making it ineffective and potentially non-compliant with broader governance requirements. An approach that prioritizes cost reduction above all else without considering the commensurate risk is also incorrect. While fiscal responsibility is important, a security governance structure driven solely by cost can lead to under-resourced security functions, inadequate controls, and increased vulnerability, which directly contravenes the fundamental purpose of security governance and can result in regulatory penalties and reputational damage. An approach that relies solely on external consultants without internal ownership and integration is problematic. While consultants can provide valuable expertise, a governance structure must be embedded within the organization to be sustainable and effective. Over-reliance on external parties can lead to a lack of internal understanding, ownership, and the ability to adapt the governance framework to evolving internal and external threats. This can also be seen as a failure in due diligence and establishing robust internal controls. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured stakeholder analysis to identify all parties with an interest in or influence over security. This should be followed by a clear communication strategy to articulate the value and necessity of security governance. The establishment of a cross-functional security committee or council with defined roles and responsibilities is crucial. This committee should be empowered to make decisions, allocate resources, and oversee the implementation and continuous improvement of the security governance framework, ensuring alignment with business objectives and regulatory requirements. Question 3. The efficiency study reveals that implementing a new automated system for access control and visitor management will significantly reduce operational costs and streamline entry procedures. However, the study provides only a cursory overview of potential security implications, focusing primarily on cost savings and user convenience. As the certified security manager, you are tasked with evaluating this proposal. Which of the following approaches best aligns with your professional responsibilities and regulatory obligations? Option A. Accept the efficiency study's findings at face value and proceed with the implementation, assuming the vendor has addressed all necessary security requirements. Option B. Delegate the security review to the IT department, as they are responsible for system implementation and management. Option C. Focus solely on the cost savings and efficiency gains highlighted in the study, and only address security concerns if they become apparent after implementation. Option D. Conduct an independent, in-depth risk assessment to identify, analyze, and evaluate all potential security risks associated with the new system, including data breaches, unauthorized access, and system vulnerabilities, and develop appropriate mitigation strategies before recommending implementation. Correct answer is D. Conduct an independent, in-depth risk assessment to identify, analyze, and evaluate all potential security risks associated with the new system, including data breaches, unauthorized access, and system vulnerabilities, and develop appropriate mitigation strategies before recommending implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it forces a security manager to balance the immediate, quantifiable benefits of a proposed efficiency measure against potential, less tangible but significant security risks. The pressure to demonstrate cost savings can create a conflict of interest, potentially leading to the underestimation or dismissal of security concerns. Careful judgment is required to ensure that security is not compromised for the sake of operational expediency. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented risk assessment process that prioritizes the identification, analysis, and evaluation of all potential security risks associated with the proposed efficiency measure. This includes considering the impact on data confidentiality, integrity, and availability, as well as physical security and personnel safety. Mitigation strategies must be developed and implemented with a clear understanding of residual risk and contingency plans. This aligns with the fundamental principles of risk management mandated by security frameworks and ethical codes, which require a proactive and comprehensive approach to safeguarding assets and information. Specifically, regulatory frameworks for security management, such as those implied by a Certified Security Manager (CSM) certification, emphasize a duty of care to identify and mitigate foreseeable risks. Ethical guidelines also demand that security professionals act in the best interest of the organization, which includes protecting it from security breaches and their consequences, even if it means challenging cost-saving initiatives that introduce unacceptable risk. An incorrect approach would be to accept the efficiency study's findings without independent verification of its security implications. This fails to uphold the security manager's responsibility to conduct a thorough risk assessment. It bypasses the critical step of identifying potential vulnerabilities that the efficiency measure might introduce or exacerbate, leading to a failure to implement necessary controls. This approach is ethically unsound as it prioritizes perceived cost savings over the organization's security posture, potentially exposing it to significant financial, reputational, and operational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the quantifiable risks identified in the efficiency study, while ignoring qualitative or less obvious security risks. This selective risk assessment is incomplete and can lead to a false sense of security. It neglects the interconnectedness of security elements and the potential for unforeseen consequences. Ethically, this approach demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to exercise professional judgment in identifying and evaluating the full spectrum of security risks. A third incorrect approach would be to implement the efficiency measure with only superficial security checks, assuming that the vendor's assurances are sufficient. This abdicates the security manager's responsibility for independent verification and risk assessment. It relies on external validation without applying internal expertise and due diligence, which is a breach of professional duty. This approach is ethically problematic as it places undue trust in third-party claims without proper scrutiny, potentially leading to the adoption of insecure practices or technologies. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management methodology. This begins with clearly defining the scope of the assessment, followed by comprehensive risk identification that considers all potential threats and vulnerabilities. Next, risks must be analyzed and evaluated based on their likelihood and impact. Subsequently, appropriate mitigation strategies should be developed, implemented, and monitored. Throughout this process, clear communication with stakeholders, including management and relevant departments, is crucial to ensure informed decision-making and accountability. The security manager must act as an independent advisor, providing objective assessments and recommendations, even when they challenge popular or financially driven initiatives. Question 4. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive approach to implementing new security controls across an organization. A recent assessment has identified critical vulnerabilities that necessitate the adoption of enhanced access management protocols, as mandated by federal regulations. However, several departments have expressed concerns about the potential disruption to their daily operations and the learning curve associated with new procedures. As the certified security manager, which of the following implementation strategies best balances regulatory compliance with operational realities and fosters long-term security effectiveness? Option A. Conduct a series of workshops with departmental representatives to collaboratively design the implementation plan, tailor procedures to specific operational needs, and establish a phased rollout with ongoing support and feedback mechanisms. Option B. Focus on deploying the most technically advanced access control systems available, assuming that superior technology will inherently overcome any user adoption challenges. Option C. Implement the new access management protocols immediately and mandatorily across all departments, providing only basic training and emphasizing strict adherence to the new policy. Option D. Postpone the implementation of the new access management protocols until all departmental concerns are fully resolved, prioritizing operational continuity over immediate regulatory compliance. The correct answer is C. Implement the new access management protocols immediately and mandatorily across all departments, providing only basic training and emphasizing strict adherence to the new policy. Explanation. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in security management, balancing the need for robust security controls with the practical realities of operational constraints and stakeholder buy-in. The Certified Security Manager, CSM, designation implies adherence to a specific professional code of conduct and regulatory environment, which for this exam is assumed to be the United States federal regulatory framework governing information security, such as NIST SB 800-53 and relevant aspects of FISMA. The professional challenge lies in the inherent tension between a top-down directive for enhanced security and the ground-level resistance or skepticism from departments that perceive these changes as burdensome or unnecessary. CSM must not only understand the technical requirements of security, but also possess the interpersonal and strategic skills to navigate organizational politics, foster collaboration, and ensure that security initiatives are effectively integrated rather than imposed. The effectiveness of any security program hinges on its adoption and consistent application by all personnel, which requires more than just issuing mandates. The correct approach involves a phased implementation strategy that prioritizes communication, stakeholder engagement, and a clear demonstration of value. This approach recognizes that security is a shared responsibility, and that successful integration requires understanding and addressing the concerns of those who will be directly impacted by new policies and procedures. By involving departmental representatives in the planning and rollout, a CSM can build consensus, identify potential operational conflicts early, and tailor implementation to minimize disruption. This collaborative method aligns with the principles of risk management and continuous improvement inherent in frameworks like NIST, which emphasize tailoring controls to the specific environment and organizational context. Furthermore, ethical considerations dictate that security measures should be implemented in a manner that is fair, transparent, and respects the operational needs of the organization, provided these needs do not compromise essential security objectives. An approach that focuses solely on immediate, mandatory compliance without adequate consultation or support risks alienating key stakeholders and creating a perception of security as an impediment rather than an enabler. This can lead to workarounds, reduced productivity, and ultimately, a less secure environment as personnel become disengaged or actively resist the new measures. Such a rigid, top-down imposition, without considering the operational impact or seeking buy-in, fails to uphold the ethical obligation of a security manager to implement controls in a practical and sustainable manner. Another incorrect approach involves deferring the implementation indefinitely due to perceived resistance. While understanding operational challenges is crucial, an indefinite delay in addressing identified security gaps, especially those mandated by regulatory frameworks like FISMA, constitutes a failure in risk management and a dereliction of duty. This inaction exposes the organization to unacceptable risks and potential regulatory penalties. Finally, an approach that prioritizes the most technically complex solutions over practical, user-friendly ones, without considering the organization's capacity for adoption and maintenance, is also flawed. While technically superior, such solutions may be difficult to implement, manage, and use effectively, leading to the same issues of non-compliance and reduced security posture as a purely imposed solution. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment, followed by a stakeholder analysis to identify key influencers and potential resistors. A communication plan should be developed to articulate the rationale for the security enhancements, the benefits they provide, and the expected impact on different departments. Pilot programs can be used to test new controls and gather feedback before a full rollout. Continuous monitoring and feedback mechanisms are essential to adapt the implementation strategy as needed and ensure ongoing effectiveness. Question 5. The assessment process reveals that the annual security budget is facing a mandatory 15% reduction due to broader organizational financial pressures. As the certified security manager, you have identified several critical areas that require increased investment, including enhanced physical access controls for sensitive areas, advanced threat detection software for the IT infrastructure, and additional personnel for round-the-clock monitoring of security systems. You must decide how to implement this budget cut while maintaining the highest possible level of security. Which of the following approaches best aligns with professional security management principles and regulatory expectations for managing security budgets and allocating resources effectively? Option A. Eliminate the planned upgrades to physical access controls entirely and cancel the purchase of advanced threat detection software, reallocating the entire saved amount to hire additional security personnel for general patrols. Option B. Reduce the budget by cutting all training and professional development for the security team, arguing that this is a non-essential operational cost that can be temporarily suspended. Option C. Negotiate with vendors for significant discounts on all security equipment and software, and seek to outsource some security functions to lower-cost providers without a thorough review of their security capabilities. Option D. Implement the budget reduction by deferring planned upgrades to physical access controls, reducing the scope of the advanced threat detection software implementation, and reallocating existing personnel to cover monitoring duties, while documenting the increased residual risk to senior management. The correct answer is D. Implement the budget reduction by deferring planned upgrades to physical access controls, reducing the scope of the advanced threat detection software implementation, and reallocating existing personnel to cover monitoring duties, while documenting the increased residual risk to senior management. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a common challenge in security management, balancing essential security needs with budgetary constraints. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the security manager to make difficult decisions that directly impact the safety and security of the organization and its personnel, while also adhering to financial limitations and ethical responsibilities. The pressure to cut costs can conflict with the imperative to maintain adequate security measures, necessitating a strategic and justifiable approach to resource allocation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any reductions do not compromise critical security functions or create unacceptable risks. The correct approach involves prioritizing security investments based on a thorough risk assessment and aligning them with the organization's overall strategic objectives and regulatory compliance requirements. This means identifying the most significant threats and vulnerabilities and allocating resources to mitigate them effectively. Justification for this approach stems from the fundamental duty of a security manager to protect assets and personnel, which is often codified in professional ethics and may be implicitly or explicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that mandate a certain standard of care or due diligence in security provision. For example, in the U.S., frameworks like NIST guidelines, though not strictly regulations for all private entities, they represent best practices often referenced in compliance and industry-specific regulations, e.g., HIPAA for healthcare, PCI DSS for payment card data, emphasize a risk-based approach to security. Ethical principles of responsibility and due care also mandate that resources are used to address the most pressing security needs. An incorrect approach would be to arbitrarily cut the budget from areas perceived as less critical without a formal risk assessment. This fails to acknowledge the interconnectedness of security systems and the potential for seemingly minor reductions to have significant cascading effects on overall security posture. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to act in the best interest of the organization's security. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize cost savings over the recommendations of the security team or expert assessments. This undermines the professional expertise of the security department and can lead to underfunding of essential security controls, increasing the organization's vulnerability to attacks or breaches. This is ethically problematic as it disregards professional judgment and potentially exposes the organization to undue risk. A further incorrect approach involves shifting budget responsibilities to other departments without proper consultation or understanding of the security implications. This can lead to a fragmented security approach, where critical security functions are not adequately funded or managed, creating gaps in protection. It also fails to uphold the security manager's responsibility for overseeing the security budget and ensuring its effective allocation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This includes identifying assets and threats, assessing vulnerabilities and potential impacts, evaluating existing controls, and determining residual risk. Based on this assessment, security initiatives should be prioritized, and budget requests should be justified with clear links to risk reduction and organizational objectives. Transparency and communication with senior management and relevant stakeholders are crucial to ensure understanding and support for security investments. When budget cuts are unavoidable, the process should involve a systematic review of all security functions to identify areas where reductions can be made with the least impact on critical security capabilities, always prioritizing the mitigation of high-priority risks. Question 6. Upon reviewing security alerts indicating potential unauthorized access to a critical customer database, what is the most appropriate initial course of action for a certified security manager to take to identify and analyze the security incident, adhering to U.S. regulatory frameworks and best practices? Option A. Rely solely on user reports and anecdotal evidence to assess the severity of the incident before taking any technical investigative steps. Option B. Immediately initiate forensic imaging of the affected database servers and relevant network logs, while simultaneously beginning a preliminary analysis of the alerts and system activity to determine the nature and scope of the potential incident. Option C. Immediately notify external law enforcement and legal counsel about a potential breach without conducting any internal investigation or containment efforts. Option D. Promptly wipe and reset all affected database servers and user accounts to ensure immediate containment and prevent further unauthorized access, without preserving any system data. The correct answer is B. Immediately initiate forensic imaging of the affected database servers and relevant network logs, while simultaneously beginning a preliminary analysis of the alerts and system activity to determine the nature and scope of the potential incident. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a security manager to balance the immediate need for information gathering with the legal and ethical obligations to preserve evidence and respect privacy. The pressure to quickly understand the scope and impact of a potential breach can lead to hasty decisions that compromise the integrity of an investigation or violate regulatory requirements. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the incident response aligns with established protocols and legal frameworks. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process that prioritizes containment and preservation of evidence, while initiating a preliminary analysis. This aligns with the principles of incident response frameworks, which emphasize a structured approach to managing security events. Specifically, in the context of U.S. regulations relevant to security management, such as those influenced by NIST guidelines, often a de facto standard for many organizations and a basis for many certifications, the focus is on a phased approach: preparation, identification, containment, eradication, and recovery. The correct approach reflects the identification phase, where initial steps are taken to confirm an incident and gather preliminary information without compromising the integrity of the affected systems or data. This is crucial for subsequent analysis and reporting, ensuring that any findings are admissible and defensible. An incorrect approach that involves immediately wiping or resetting affected systems without proper forensic imaging or documentation would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action would destroy critical evidence, hindering the ability to determine the root cause, scope, and impact of the incident. It could also violate data breach notification laws, e.g., state-specific breach laws in the U.S., that require timely and accurate reporting based on a thorough understanding of the incident. Furthermore, it would contravene best practices for digital forensics and incident response, potentially leading to legal repercussions and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, such as solely relying on anecdotal reports from users without initiating any technical investigation or logging, fails to establish a verifiable incident. This approach lacks the rigor required for effective incident analysis and could lead to misallocation of resources or a delayed response to a genuine threat. It also bypasses the requirement for objective evidence gathering, which is fundamental to security management and compliance. Finally, an approach that involves immediately escalating the incident to external law enforcement without an internal assessment and containment strategy might be premature and could lead to unnecessary disruption or premature disclosure of sensitive information. A law enforcement involvement is often necessary. It should typically follow an initial internal assessment to provide them with the most relevant and actionable information, and to ensure that internal containment measures are in place. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve adhering to a predefined incident response plan. This plan should outline clear steps for incident detection, analysis, containment, eradication, and recovery. Key elements include establishing clear roles and responsibilities, maintaining detailed logs of all actions taken, prioritizing evidence preservation, and ensuring compliance with all applicable legal and regulatory requirements. A structured, evidence-based approach is paramount. Question 7. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a comprehensive business continuity plan, BCP, will require significant upfront investment in redundant systems, off-site data storage, and regular staff training. However, the potential financial and reputational damage from a major disruption could be exponentially higher. As a certified security manager, which approach best aligns with regulatory requirements and professional responsibility when developing and implementing the BCP? Option A. Delegate the entire BCP development process to the IT department, assuming they possess all necessary expertise and resources. Option B. Prioritize the development and implementation of a robust BCP that addresses identified risks and regulatory mandates, even if it requires substantial initial investment, ensuring long-term organizational resilience. Option C. Adopt a generic BCP template and apply it across all departments with minimal customization to reduce development time and cost. Option D. Focus on implementing the most cost-effective BCP solutions available, prioritizing immediate budget constraints over comprehensive risk mitigation. The correct answer is B. Prioritize the development and implementation of a robust BCP that addresses identified risks and regulatory mandates, even if it requires substantial initial investment, ensuring long-term organizational resilience. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate financial implications of a business continuity plan, BCP, with its long-term strategic importance and regulatory compliance. The pressure to reduce costs can lead to overlooking critical elements of a BCP, potentially exposing the organization to significant risks and regulatory penalties. Careful judgment is required to ensure that cost-saving measures do not compromise the effectiveness of the plan, and its ability to protect the organization's operations, reputation, and stakeholders. The correct approach involves prioritizing the development and implementation of a BCP that aligns with the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations, even if it incurs initial costs. This approach recognizes that the cost of a disaster or disruption far outweighs the investment in a robust BCP. Specifically, it emphasizes a comprehensive risk assessment, identification of critical business functions, development of recovery strategies, and regular testing and maintenance. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and prudent management expected of security professionals. From a regulatory perspective, many frameworks mandate that organizations have adequate plans in place to ensure operational resilience and protect sensitive data, which directly relates to business continuity. Ethical considerations also play a role, as organizations have a responsibility to their employees, customers, and shareholders to safeguard their interests during disruptive events. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on minimizing upfront expenditure without a thorough understanding of potential impacts would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of risk awareness and a disregard for the potential financial and reputational damage that could result from an inadequate BCP. Such an approach could lead to non-compliance with regulatory requirements, exposing the organization to fines and legal repercussions. For example, if a BCP is underfunded or lacks essential components like data backup and recovery, it could violate data protection regulations, leading to severe penalties and loss of customer trust. Another incorrect approach might involve adopting a generic, off-the-shelf BCP template without tailoring it to the organization's specific needs and risks. This is problematic because it fails to address the unique vulnerabilities and critical functions of the organization. While seemingly cost-effective, it creates a false sense of security and leaves the organization unprepared for actual disruptions. This approach demonstrates a lack of professional diligence and an abdication of responsibility to conduct a proper risk assessment and develop a tailored strategy. A third incorrect approach could be to delegate BCP development entirely to a single department without cross-functional input. This siloed approach often results in a plan that does not adequately consider the interdependencies between different business units, leading to a fragmented and ineffective recovery process. It also fails to foster a culture of resilience across the organization, which is crucial for successful BCP implementation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Understand the regulatory landscape and identify all applicable requirements for business continuity and operational resilience. 2. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential threats and their impact on critical business functions. 3. Engage key stakeholders from all relevant departments to gather input and ensure buy-in. 4. Develop a BCP that is tailored to the organization's specific risks, critical functions, and regulatory obligations, considering both preventative and recovery measures. 5. Perform cost-benefit analysis not just on the immediate expenditure, but on the potential cost of inaction versus the investment in resilience. 6. Implement, test, and regularly review and update the BCP to ensure its continued effectiveness. Question 8. Operational review demonstrates a significant increase in reported security incidents across multiple departments, with a growing concern from senior leadership regarding potential financial and reputational damage. The security team has proposed a series of immediate, high-cost technology upgrades to address these incidents. However, departmental managers have expressed reservations, citing potential operational disruptions and a lack of clear justification for the proposed expenditures beyond the incident reports. The Certified Security Manager, CSM, is tasked with developing a revised strategy. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of effective security management and regulatory compliance for a Certified Security Manager, CSM? Option A. Focus on implementing cost-saving measures within the security department by deferring non-essential technology upgrades and reallocating existing resources to address the most frequently reported, lower-impact incidents. Option B. Proceed with the proposed technology upgrades for departments that have experienced the highest number of incidents, while informing other departments that their security concerns will be addressed in a future phase after initial implementation is complete. Option C. Immediately implement the proposed high-cost technology upgrades as recommended by the security team to demonstrate a proactive response to leadership and address the reported incidents with the most advanced solutions available. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive, organization-wide risk assessment to identify the root causes of the increased incidents, evaluate the effectiveness of existing controls, and prioritize mitigation strategies based on potential impact and likelihood, while engaging all relevant stakeholders to ensure buy-in and operational feasibility. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive, organization-wide risk assessment to identify the root causes of the increased incidents, evaluate the effectiveness of existing controls, and prioritize mitigation strategies based on potential impact and likelihood, while engaging all relevant stakeholders to ensure buy-in and operational feasibility. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing immediate operational needs with long-term strategic security objectives, all while navigating the complex web of stakeholder expectations and regulatory compliance. A certified security manager, CSM, must demonstrate a comprehensive understanding of how to integrate security measures into the broader organizational context, ensuring that security is not an isolated function, but a core component of business operations. The pressure to demonstrate tangible results quickly can sometimes lead to short-sighted decisions that may not align with established security principles or regulatory mandates. The correct approach involves a systematic and evidence-based assessment of security risks, prioritizing mitigation efforts based on their potential impact and likelihood, and aligning these efforts with the organization's strategic goals and regulatory obligations. This approach is right because it embodies the principles of risk management, which are fundamental to effective security management. Specifically, it aligns with the general principles of due diligence and duty of care expected of security professionals. By focusing on a comprehensive risk assessment and stakeholder engagement, the CSM ensures that security investments are proportionate to the identified threats and vulnerabilities, and that all relevant parties are informed and involved in the decision-making process. This proactive and integrated strategy is essential for achieving sustainable security improvements and maintaining regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on high visibility, low-impact security measures fails because it neglects a thorough risk assessment. This can lead to misallocation of resources, leaving the organization vulnerable to more significant threats that were not adequately addressed. It also risks non-compliance with regulations that mandate specific risk-based security controls or require demonstrable due diligence. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate cost savings over robust security controls is professionally unacceptable. Security is an investment, not merely an expense. Cutting corners on security can expose the organization to substantial financial losses, reputational damage, and legal liabilities that far outweigh any short-term savings. This approach directly contravenes the ethical obligation to protect organizational assets and personnel, and can lead to regulatory penalties for failing to meet minimum security standards. Finally, an approach that bypasses key stakeholders and implements security measures unilaterally is flawed. Effective security management requires collaboration and buy-in from various departments and leadership. Ignoring stakeholders can lead to resistance, operational disruptions, and a failure to identify critical security requirements that only those stakeholders might be aware of. This can also create compliance issues if certain stakeholders have regulatory responsibilities related to security that are not being met. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the organizational context, including strategic objectives, operational processes, and the regulatory landscape. This is followed by a comprehensive risk assessment to identify and prioritize threats and vulnerabilities. Stakeholder engagement is crucial throughout this process to gather input, build consensus, and ensure alignment. Security strategies should then be developed based on this risk assessment and stakeholder input, with clear objectives, measurable outcomes, and a plan for continuous monitoring and improvement. Adherence to relevant regulations and ethical principles should be a guiding factor at every stage. Question 9. Examination of the data shows that our organization has invested significantly in security awareness and training programs over the past year. To justify continued investment and demonstrate the program's value to senior management, which of the following approaches for assessing the program's effectiveness is most aligned with demonstrating tangible security improvements and regulatory compliance? Option A. Conducting post-training surveys to gauge employee satisfaction with the training content and delivery methods. Option B. Evaluating the breadth of security topics covered in the training curriculum against industry best practice checklists. Option C. Measuring the number of training modules completed by employees and the total hours of training delivered. Option D. Analyzing the reduction in security incidents, the severity of those incidents, and observe changes in employee security-related behaviors, correlating these metrics with the training initiatives. The correct answer is C. Measuring the number of training modules completed by employees and the total hours of training delivered. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge for security managers, demonstrating the effectiveness of a security awareness and training program to stakeholders who may not fully grasp the nuances of security risks or the impact of human factors. The challenge lies in moving beyond simply delivering training to proving its tangible value and alignment with organizational objectives and regulatory requirements. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both defensible from a compliance perspective and persuasive from a business perspective. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that measures changes in employee behavior and knowledge, directly linking these changes to a reduction in security incidents and their associated costs. This aligns with the principles of effective security management, which emphasizes risk reduction and return on investment. From a regulatory standpoint, many frameworks, such as those governing data protection or financial services, implicitly or explicitly require organizations to demonstrate that their security controls, including training, are effective in mitigating identified risks. Measuring behavioral changes and incident reduction provides this demonstrable evidence. Ethically, it ensures that resources are being used effectively to protect the organization and its stakeholders. An approach that focuses solely on the number of training sessions delivered fails to demonstrate impact. While attendance is a basic metric, it does not indicate comprehension or behavioral change, nor does it prove that the training is effectively reducing risk. This approach is ethically questionable, as it may lead to a false sense of security and regulatory noncompliance if the training is not actually effective. An approach that relies on employee feedback surveys alone, without correlating this feedback to actual incident data or behavioral shifts, is also insufficient. While employee satisfaction with training is useful, it is a subjective measure and does not guarantee improved security posture. This can lead to regulatory scrutiny if the organization cannot demonstrate that its training program is actively contributing to risk mitigation. An approach that prioritizes the breadth of topics covered over the depth of understanding and application is problematic. A wide range of topics may seem comprehensive, but if employees do not understand or retain the information sufficiently to change their behavior, the program is ineffective. This can result in regulatory noncompliance if critical security behaviors are not adequately addressed and reinforced. The professional decision-making process for such situations should involve 1. Clearly defining the objectives of the security awareness and training program, linking them to organizational risk appetite and regulatory obligations. 2. Identifying key performance indicators, KPI, that measure both knowledge acquisition and, more importantly, behavioral change and incident reduction. 3. Selecting appropriate methodologies for data collection and analysis to measure these KPIs. 4. Regularly reporting on the program's effectiveness, using data-driven insights to justify resource allocation and program adjustments. 5. Continuously iterating and improving the program based on the impact assessment findings. Question 10. Assessment of the most effective strategy for developing and implementing an incident response plan within a U.S.-based organization, considering regulatory compliance and operational readiness. Option A. Focus on acquiring advanced incident detection and response technologies, assuming these tools will largely automate the response process and minimize the need for extensive human training. Option B. Prioritize the creation of a highly technical incident response plan with detailed technical procedures, deferring extensive personnel training and simulation exercises until a significant incident occurs. Option C. Create a detailed incident response plan. Implement a phased approach involving extensive tabletop exercises and simulations for key personnel, and establish a formal process for post-exercise review and plan updates. Option D. Develop a comprehensive incident response plan document. Conduct initial awareness training for all staff, and schedule annual reviews of the document. Correct answer is D. Develop a comprehensive incident response plan document, conduct initial awareness training for all staff, and schedule annual reviews of the document. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in security management. Ensuring an incident response plan (IRP) is not just a document, but a living, effective tool. The professional challenge lies in moving beyond mere compliance to achieving genuine operational readiness. This requires a nuanced understanding of how different implementation strategies impact the plan's efficacy in a real-world crisis. Careful judgment is needed to select the approach that best balances thoroughness, practicality, and the ability to adapt to evolving threats. The correct approach involves a phased, iterative implementation that includes comprehensive training, regular testing through realistic simulations, and a defined process for updating the plan based on lessons learned from exercises and actual incidents. This aligns with best practices in incident response management, emphasizing continuous improvement and organizational learning. Regulatory frameworks, such as those often found in IT security standards and compliance mandates, e.g., NIST guidelines, which are foundational for many U.S.-based security certifications, stress the importance of not only having a plan, but also ensuring personnel are trained and the plan is validated through practice. This proactive stance minimizes response time, reduces the impact of incidents, and demonstrates due diligence in protecting organizational assets and data. An approach that focuses solely on initial documentation without subsequent validation fails to meet regulatory expectations for preparedness. While a documented plan is a prerequisite, its effectiveness is unproven without testing. This oversight can lead to significant delays and errors during an actual incident, potentially violating data breach notification laws or other regulatory requirements that mandate timely and effective response. An approach that prioritizes technical solutions over human factors overlooks the critical role of personnel in executing an IRP. Incident response is fundamentally a human-driven process, and neglecting training and clear communication channels renders even the most technically sophisticated plan ineffective. This can result in miscommunication, delayed actions, and a failure to adhere to established protocols, leading to regulatory noncompliance and increased damage. An approach that treats the IRP as a static document, updated only annually without considering emerging threats or lessons learned from smaller events, is also deficient. The threat landscape is dynamic, and an IRP must evolve to remain relevant. Failure to incorporate new intelligence or adapt to changes in the organization's infrastructure or business processes means the plan may be obsolete when needed most, leading to inadequate responses and potential regulatory penalties for failing to maintain a current and effective security posture. The professional reasoning process for such situations involves a risk-based evaluation. Security managers must first identify the critical components of an effective IRP, which include clear roles and responsibilities, communication protocols, containment and eradication procedures, and recovery steps. They then assess different implementation strategies against these components, considering the organization's specific context, resources, and threat profile. The chosen strategy should prioritize demonstrable readiness, validated through practical exercises and continuous improvement, ensuring alignment with both regulatory requirements and the organization's security objectives. Question 11. Which approach would be most effective in implementing perimeter security measures, including fences, gates, and access control systems, in compliance with regulatory frameworks for a certified security manager, CSM? Option A. Install the most expensive and technologically advanced fencing and gate systems available, assuming that higher cost equates to superior security, without a detailed analysis of specific threats or operational impact. Option B. Focus solely on installing high-security fences and gates, neglecting the integration of access control systems and surveillance, as these are considered secondary to physical barriers. Option C. Implement perimeter security based on industry best practices for generic facilities, without conducting a site-specific risk assessment or considering the unique regulatory obligations of the organization. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify specific threats and vulnerabilities. Then design and implement layered security measures, including appropriate physical barriers, robust access control systems, and surveillance, tailored to the identified risks and regulatory requirements. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify specific threats and vulnerabilities. Then design and implement layered security measures, including appropriate physical barriers, robust access control systems, and surveillance, tailored to the identified risks and regulatory requirements. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing security effectiveness with operational efficiency and regulatory compliance. A certified security manager, CSM, must not only understand the technical aspects of perimeter security, but also how to implement them within the specific legal and ethical framework governing their operations. The choice of approach directly impacts the organization's security posture, its ability to operate smoothly, and its adherence to relevant standards. Careful judgment is required to select measures that are both robust and proportionate to the identified risks, while also considering the financial and human resources available. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment to inform the selection and implementation of perimeter security measures. This means understanding the specific threats and vulnerabilities of the site, the nature of the assets being protected, and the regulatory requirements applicable to the organization's industry and location. Implementing layered security, where multiple security controls work together, is a best practice. This includes physical barriers like appropriate fencing and gates, supplemented by active measures such as access control systems and surveillance. The justification for this approach lies in its alignment with the principles of due diligence and the duty of care expected of security professionals. It ensures that security investments are targeted and effective, minimizing the likelihood of breaches, while also demonstrating a commitment to regulatory compliance and responsible security management. An incorrect approach would be to implement perimeter security measures based solely on cost-effectiveness without a thorough risk assessment. This could lead to inadequate protection against relevant threats, leaving the organization vulnerable. It also fails to demonstrate due diligence, potentially violating regulatory requirements that mandate a risk-based approach to security. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize the most technologically advanced or expensive solutions, without considering their suitability for the specific environment or the organization's operational needs. This can result in over-engineered or impractical security systems that are difficult to manage, maintain, or integrate, ultimately undermining their effectiveness and potentially leading to non-compliance if they create operational impediments that violate other regulations. A further incorrect approach would be to focus exclusively on physical barriers like fences and gates, neglecting the importance of access control systems and surveillance. While physical barriers are crucial, they are often the first line of defense and can be overcome. Without integrated access control and monitoring, the effectiveness of the perimeter is significantly diminished, and the ability to detect and respond to breaches is compromised, which could be a failure to meet the comprehensive security requirements mandated by certain regulations. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with a thorough understanding of the organization's security objectives and the specific threats it faces. This should be followed by a detailed risk assessment, which will identify vulnerabilities and inform the selection of appropriate security controls. The chosen controls should then be implemented in a layered manner, ensuring that physical, technical, and procedural measures are integrated. Regular review and testing of the security systems are essential to ensure their continued effectiveness and compliance with evolving regulatory landscapes and threat environments. Question 12. Implementation of a security audit reveals a critical misconfiguration in the organization's primary firewall, creating a significant vulnerability. As the certified security manager, CSM, conducting the audit, what is the most appropriate course of action to ensure both compliance and effective risk mitigation? Option A. Document the misconfiguration and recommend remediation in the next scheduled audit cycle. Option B. Immediately reconfigure the firewall to the secure baseline, documenting the change as an emergency fix. Option C. Inform management of the misconfiguration and await their explicit directive before any action is taken. Option D. Report the misconfiguration and its associated risk to IT security and management and initiate remediation through the formal change management process. The correct answer is B. Immediately reconfigure the firewall to the secure baseline, documenting the change as an emergency fix. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for certified security managers, CSM, where a critical security control, the firewall, is found to be misconfigured during an audit. Challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for remediation with the established change management processes and the potential impact on business operations. A hasty, unauthorized change could introduce new vulnerabilities or disrupt critical services, while delaying remediation could expose the organization to significant risks. Professional judgment is required to navigate these competing priorities within the defined regulatory and organizational framework. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves documenting the finding, immediately escalating it to the relevant IT security team and management for risk assessment, and then proceeding with remediation strictly through the established change management process. This is the most appropriate professional response because it adheres to the principles of good governance and compliance. Specifically, it aligns with the requirements of many regulatory frameworks that mandate documented risk assessments, formal change control procedures, and timely remediation of identified vulnerabilities. For instance, frameworks like NIST SB 800-53, which often informs U.S. federal and private sector security practices, emphasize the importance of a robust change management process for security controls and require documented risk assessments to prioritize remediation efforts. This approach ensures that changes are authorized, tested, and implemented in a controlled manner, minimizing the risk of unintended consequences and maintaining auditability. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing an immediate, unauthorized fix by the auditor bypasses the formal change management process. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It undermines the established controls designed to prevent accidental disruption or the introduction of new security flaws. Such an action would likely violate internal policies and could be seen as exceeding the auditor's mandate, potentially leading to accountability issues. It also fails to involve the responsible IT team in the remediation, hindering knowledge transfer and long-term ownership of the security posture. Ignoring the misconfiguration and documenting it for a future audit cycle is also professionally unacceptable. While documentation is important, failing to act on a critical security vulnerability identified during an audit constitutes a dereliction of duty. Many regulations require timely remediation of identified risks. Delaying action on a misconfigured firewall, which is a primary security perimeter control, exposes the organization to immediate and potentially severe threats, violating the fundamental principle of protecting organizational assets. Reporting the issue to management but waiting for their explicit instruction before any action is taken, even if the risk is high, can also be problematic. While escalation is crucial, a CSM has a professional responsibility to ensure that identified critical risks are addressed promptly. This approach can lead to unnecessary delays, especially if management is unavailable or indecisive, leaving the organization vulnerable. It shifts the entire burden of decision-making for a critical security issue to management, potentially slowing down the necessary remediation process. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Identification. Clearly identify the security finding, misconfigured firewall. 2. Assessment. Quantify the risk associated with the finding, considering the potential impact and likelihood of exploitation. 3. Escalation. Immediately communicate the finding and its associated risk to the appropriate stakeholders, IT security management. 4. Remediation planning. Work collaboratively with the responsible teams to plan remediation, adhering to established change management processes. 5. Verification. Ensure the remediation is effective through retesting or follow-up audits. Throughout this process, maintaining clear documentation and adhering to regulatory requirements and organizational policies are paramount. Question 13. Governance review demonstrates that the organization's primary customer database has been corrupted due to a ransomware attack. The incident response team has identified multiple backup sets, including a recent full backup that appears to have been created after the ransomware infiltrated the network, and an older but verified full backup from a week prior. The team is under immense pressure to restore customer service operations immediately. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for rapid restoration with data integrity and regulatory compliance? Option A. Initiate a phased restoration process, starting with the older, verified backup for core customer data, and concurrently perform integrity checks and validation on the more recent backup before considering its use for less critical data. Option B. Immediately restore the most recent full backup to minimize downtime, and defer any data integrity verification until after all systems are operational. Option C. Prioritize the restoration of critical customer service functions using the older, verified backup, and then attempt to reconcile the lost week of data through other means. Option D. Restore the most recent full backup, assuming it contains the latest customer data, and address any data integrity issues post-restoration. The correct answer is D. Restore the most recent full backup, assuming it contains the latest customer data, and address any data integrity issues post-restoration. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a certified security manager, CSM, to balance the immediate need for operational continuity with the long-term implications of data integrity and regulatory compliance. The pressure to restore services quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise the robustness of the recovery process, potentially exposing the organization to significant risks. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen recovery strategy is not only fast, but also secure, complete, and compliant with all applicable regulations. The correct approach involves prioritizing the restoration of critical systems and data based on a predefined business impact analysis, BIA, and recovery time objectives, RTO, while simultaneously initiating a comprehensive data integrity verification and validation process. This ensures that the restored data is accurate and usable, minimizing the risk of operational errors or compliance breaches stemming from corrupted information. This approach aligns with the principles of sound risk management and the regulatory expectation that organizations maintain accurate and accessible records. Specifically, within the U.S. regulatory framework, this aligns with the principles of data integrity and availability mandated by regulations such as HIPAA for healthcare data, SOX for financial reporting, and various NIST guidelines for cybersecurity best practices, all of which emphasize the importance of reliable data for business operations and compliance. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on restoring the most recently backed up data without verifying its integrity. This could lead to the reintroduction of corrupted data, causing further operational disruptions and potential compliance failures. For example, if the backup itself was compromised or incomplete, restoring it without validation would be detrimental. Another incorrect approach would be to restore data from an older, known good backup that significantly predates the incident, even if it means losing a substantial amount of recent, critical data. While this might seem like a safe option to avoid corrupted data, it could lead to significant business losses due to data obsolescence and failure to meet regulatory requirements for data retention and accuracy. A third incorrect approach would be to bypass standard recovery procedures and directly restore from individual system backups without a centralized, validated process. This increases the risk of inconsistencies across systems and makes it difficult to ensure a complete and accurate recovery, potentially violating data governance policies and regulatory mandates for controlled data handling. The professional reasoning process for a CSM in such a situation should involve 1. Activating the incident response plan, which should include predefined roles and responsibilities for data recovery. 2. Consulting the BIA and disaster recovery plan to identify critical systems and their RTOs. 3. Evaluating available backup sources, considering their recency, integrity, and security. 4. Prioritizing restoration based on criticality and RTOs, ensuring that data integrity checks are integrated into the restoration process. 5. Documenting all recovery steps and decisions for audit and post-incident review. 6. Communicating progress and any challenges to relevant stakeholders. Question 14. During the evaluation of a new security program for a financial institution operating under U.S. federal regulations, which approach to developing and managing the program best aligns with the principles of regulatory compliance and effective risk management? Option A. Creating a program that primarily reacts to security incidents as they occur, implementing ad hoc solutions to address each breach and focusing on post-incident remediation rather than preventative measures. Option B. Developing a program that prioritizes the most cost-effective security solutions available, focusing on immediate budget constraints while addressing only the most critical, high-profile vulnerabilities. Option C. Designing a program that meticulously maps all proposed security controls and policies directly to the specific requirements outlined in relevant U.S. federal regulations, e.g., GLBA, NIDF cybersecurity regulation, with a documented process for ongoing compliance monitoring and adaptation. Option D, implementing a program based on a widely recognized cybersecurity framework, such as NIST CSF, and ensuring its controls are regularly audited for effectiveness against common industry threats. The correct answer is D, implementing a program based on a widely recognized cybersecurity framework, such as NIST CSF, and ensuring its controls are regularly audited for effectiveness against common industry threats. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because the Certified Security Manager, CSM, is tasked with developing a security program that must not only be effective in mitigating risks, but also demonstrably compliant with the specific regulatory framework governing their operations. The core difficulty lies in balancing the practical implementation of security measures with the stringent requirements of the applicable laws and guidelines, ensuring that the program is both robust and legally sound. Careful judgment is required to avoid overcompliance that could be inefficient or undercompliance that could lead to significant penalties. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of risk assessment, policy development, control implementation, and ongoing monitoring, all explicitly mapped to the requirements of the relevant regulatory framework. This ensures that the security program is tailored to the specific threats and vulnerabilities faced by the organization, while adhering to all legal and ethical obligations. Regulatory justification for this approach stems from the fundamental principle of due diligence, which mandates that organizations take reasonable steps to protect their assets and comply with all applicable laws. Ethical justification lies in the responsibility to protect stakeholders, including employees, customers, and the public, from harm. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on industry best practices without explicit alignment to the specific regulatory framework is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the primary legal obligation of compliance. While industry best practices can inform a security program, they do not supersede or replace the specific mandates of the governing regulations. Relying on generic best practices without a regulatory audit risks overlooking critical compliance requirements, leading to potential legal repercussions and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes cost-effectiveness over comprehensive risk mitigation and regulatory adherence is also professionally flawed. Security programs are not merely cost centers. They are essential investments in organizational resilience and legal compliance. Cutting corners on essential security controls or compliance activities to save money directly contravenes the duty of care and the principles of risk management, potentially exposing the organization to unacceptable levels of risk and regulatory penalties. A third incorrect approach that adopts a reactive rather than proactive stance, addressing security issues only after incidents occur, is fundamentally unsound. Effective security program development is inherently proactive, involving the anticipation of threats, the implementation of preventative measures, and the establishment of robust incident response capabilities. A reactive approach demonstrates a failure in risk management and a disregard for the ongoing nature of security threats, leading to increased vulnerability and potential for significant harm. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured methodology. First, thoroughly understand the specific regulatory framework applicable to the organization. Second, conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify threats and vulnerabilities relevant to the organization's operations and assets. Third, develop security policies and procedures that directly address identified risks and explicitly meet regulatory requirements. Fourth, implement appropriate security controls, ensuring they are both effective and compliant. Finally, establish a robust monitoring and review process to ensure the program remains effective and continues to meet evolving regulatory and threat landscapes. This systematic, risk-based, and compliance-driven approach ensures that the security program is both practical and legally defensible. Question 15. System analysis indicates a surge in security alerts across multiple critical systems. As the certified security manager, what is the most appropriate initial approach to manage these alerts and ensure effective SOC operations, considering the need for timely incident response and minimizing business disruption? Option A. Conduct a rapid impact assessment for each alert, prioritizing response based on the potential for data compromise, service disruption, and regulatory noncompliance before escalating containment or remediation efforts. Option B. Immediately initiate containment procedures for all systems generating alerts to prevent potential breaches, regardless of the perceived severity of individual alerts. Option C. Focus on analyzing the technical indicators of compromise IOC for each alert to identify the root cause, delaying any response actions until a definitive threat is confirmed. Option D. Rely solely on automated response playbooks for all alerts to ensure consistent and rapid handling, minimizing the need for human intervention. The correct answer is B. Immediately initiate containment procedures for all systems generating alerts to prevent potential breaches, regardless of the perceived severity of individual alerts. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in SOC operations, balancing the need for rapid incident response with the requirement for thorough impact assessment. The professional challenge lies in the potential for both underreacting, missing critical threats, and overreacting, causing unnecessary disruption and resource drain. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the response is proportionate to the actual or potential impact of the incident, aligning with both operational efficiency and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves a structured impact assessment that prioritizes threats based on their potential to disrupt critical business functions, compromise sensitive data, or violate regulatory requirements. This aligns with the principles of risk management and due diligence expected of a certified security manager. Specifically, regulatory frameworks often mandate that organizations establish processes for identifying, assessing, and responding to security incidents in a timely and effective manner. A structured impact assessment ensures that resources are allocated to the most significant threats, thereby fulfilling the organization's duty of care and compliance obligation. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the volume of alerts without considering their potential impact fails to adhere to risk-based security principles. This can lead to alert fatigue, wasted resources on low-priority events, and a delayed response to genuinely critical incidents, potentially violating regulatory requirements for timely incident handling and data breach notification. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate containment of all alerts, regardless of severity, can lead to operational disruption and significant business impact. While containment is crucial, an indiscriminate approach can cause more harm than good, especially if it involves shutting down critical systems without a clear understanding of the threat's scope and impact. This can also lead to regulatory noncompliance if essential services are unnecessarily interrupted. A third incorrect approach that relies solely on automated responses without human oversight for critical incidents is also problematic. While automation is valuable for initial triage and response to known threats, complex or novel incidents require human analysis and judgment to accurately assess impact and determine the most appropriate course of action, ensuring compliance with incident response mandates. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the organization's business objectives, critical assets, and regulatory obligation. When an incident is detected, the immediate steps should be to gather sufficient information to perform a rapid, yet effective, impact assessment. This assessment should consider factors such as the type of data involved, the systems affected, the potential for lateral movement, and the likelihood of regulatory noncompliance. Based on this assessment, a prioritized response plan should be enacted, ensuring that resources are deployed efficiently and effectively to mitigate the most significant risks. Question 16. Performance analysis shows a critical data breach has been detected, with evidence suggesting unauthorized access to customer personal identifiable information, PI. The incident response team is on standby. What is the most appropriate immediate action to take regarding containment, eradication, and recovery? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive, multi-week forensic investigation to fully understand the scope and impact before any containment or eradication actions are taken. Option B. Immediately isolate all systems that have shown any sign of activity related to the breach, regardless of their criticality, to prevent further spread. Option C. Focus solely on removing the identified malware or unauthorized access vector, without considering the potential impact on ongoing business operations or the integrity of recovered data. Option D. Prioritize containment and eradication efforts based on a rapid assessment of the systems and data most critical to business operations, and most sensitive to compromise, while simultaneously preparing for recovery. The correct answer is B. Immediately isolate all systems that have shown any sign of activity related to the breach, regardless of their criticality, to prevent further spread. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in incident response, balancing the urgency of containment with the need for thoroughness to prevent recurrence and meet regulatory obligations. The professional challenge lies in making rapid, informed decisions under pressure, where a misstep can lead to further compromise, data loss, or regulatory penalties. The Certified Security Manager, CSM, must demonstrate a deep understanding of incident response frameworks and their legal and ethical implications. The correct approach involves a systematic process of impact assessment to prioritize containment and eradication efforts based on the potential harm to the organization and its stakeholders. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and risk management expected of a security professional. Specifically, a robust impact assessment helps identify critical assets and sensitive data, guiding the allocation of resources to address the most significant threats first. This proactive and risk-based methodology is implicitly supported by various regulatory frameworks that mandate reasonable security measures and prompt incident response to protect sensitive information and maintain operational integrity. Ethical considerations also dictate that the organization must act responsibly to mitigate harm to customers and partners. An incorrect approach would be to immediately isolate all affected systems without a proper impact assessment. This could lead to unnecessary business disruption, impacting critical operations, and potentially causing greater financial or reputational damage than the incident itself. Such a broad, indiscriminate action might also hinder the investigation process by destroying valuable forensic evidence, which could have regulatory implications if an investigation requires detailed incident reconstruction. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on eradicating the threat without considering the broader impact on business operations and data integrity. This could result in incomplete remediation, leaving vulnerabilities open or causing data corruption during the removal process. This failure to consider the full scope of the incident and its consequences could violate regulatory requirements for data protection and business continuity. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to delay containment and eradication to conduct an exhaustive, long-term impact assessment before taking any action. This would expose the organization to prolonged risk, allowing the incident to spread and cause more damage, directly contravening the fundamental principles of incident response and potentially leading to severe regulatory sanctions for failing to act with due diligence and promptness. The professional decision-making process should involve a rapid, yet structured, impact assessment. This includes identifying the type of incident, the systems and data affected, the potential for data exfiltration or corruption, and the criticality of the affected business functions. Based on this assessment, containment strategies should be prioritized, followed by eradication and recovery efforts, always with an eye towards preserving evidence for post-incident analysis and potential regulatory or legal proceedings. Question 17. The monitoring system demonstrates a critical failure in the primary data center's cooling infrastructure, leading to an imminent threat of hardware damage and service disruption. The security manager must initiate the disaster recovery process. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory compliance and professional best practices for business continuity and disaster recovery? Option A. Direct the IT team to manually reroute all essential services to a secondary, less secure, off-site location without consulting the formal disaster recovery plan to minimize downtime. Option B. Immediately initiate the documented disaster recovery plan, prioritizing the restoration of critical business functions and data integrity according to predefined recovery time objectives, RTO, and recovery point objectives, RPO, while ensuring all recovery steps are logged. Option C. Focus solely on physically securing the affected data center to prevent further damage, assuming IT will independently manage the service restoration. Option D. Begin an immediate, informal assessment of available backup tapes and attempt to restore services on a best effort basis, without referencing any established recovery procedures. The correct answer is B. Immediately initiate the documented disaster recovery plan, prioritizing the restoration of critical business functions and data integrity according to predefined recovery time objectives, RTO, and recovery point objectives, RPO, while ensuring all recovery steps are logged. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a security manager to balance immediate operational needs with long-term regulatory compliance and the ethical imperative to protect organizational assets and stakeholder interests during a disruptive event. The pressure to restore services quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of disaster recovery processes, potentially violating regulatory requirements and exposing the organization to significant risks. Careful judgment is required to ensure that recovery actions are both effective and compliant. The correct approach involves a systematic, documented, and tested business continuity and disaster recovery plan that aligns with relevant regulatory frameworks. This approach is right because it ensures that the organization can resume critical operations within acceptable timeframes while adhering to legal and industry standards. Specifically, for a certified security manager (CSM) exam, this would likely involve adherence to frameworks like NIST SB 800-34, Contingency Planning Guide for Federal Information Systems, or similar established best practices that are often implicitly or explicitly referenced in professional certifications. These frameworks emphasize risk assessment, business impact analysis, strategy development, plan development, testing and exercises, and maintenance. Regulatory justification stems from the need to demonstrate due diligence in protecting sensitive data, maintaining operational resilience, and meeting contractual obligations, all of which are often mandated by various regulations depending on the industry, e.g., HIPAA for healthcare, PCI DSS for payment card industry, GDPR for data privacy. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over documented procedures fails to meet regulatory requirements for auditable and repeatable recovery processes. This can lead to inconsistent recovery outcomes, increased risk of data loss or corruption, and an inability to demonstrate compliance during an audit. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on ad hoc manual interventions without a predefined plan ignores the fundamental principles of business continuity and disaster recovery. This is ethically problematic as it exposes the organization and its stakeholders to unnecessary risks due to the lack of structured and tested mitigation strategies. Furthermore, an approach that neglects to involve key stakeholders in the recovery process, such as IT, legal, and business unit representatives, creates communication silos and can result in recovery efforts that do not adequately address all critical business functions or regulatory obligations. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the regulatory landscape applicable to the organization. 2. Activating the predefined and tested business continuity and disaster recovery plan. 3. Prioritizing recovery efforts based on the business impact analysis and regulatory mandates. 4. Documenting all recovery actions and decisions. 5. Communicating effectively with all relevant stakeholders. 6. Conducting a post-incident review to identify lessons learned and update plans accordingly. Question 18. The performance metrics show a significant increase in operational costs for the security department over the last fiscal year, prompting senior management to request immediate and substantial budget reductions. As the certified security manager, CSM, you are responsible for developing and implementing the organization's security plans, policies, and procedures. You have identified several areas where cost savings could be achieved, but some of these involve reducing staffing in surveillance monitoring and delaying the upgrade of critical access control systems. You are aware that these reductions could potentially increase the organization's exposure to certain risks and may impact compliance with existing security protocols. What is the most ethically and professionally sound approach to address this directive? Option A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify the specific vulnerabilities and potential impacts of each proposed cost-saving measure, and then present a data-driven proposal to senior management that prioritizes essential security functions and outlines the risks associated with unacceptable reductions, while also suggesting alternative cost-saving strategies that do not compromise core security. Option B. Immediately implement the proposed budget cuts in surveillance staffing and access control system upgrades to demonstrate responsiveness to management's directive and achieve the required cost savings, assuming that the organization can absorb any minor increases in risk. Option C. Inform senior management that budget reductions in critical security areas are not feasible and refuse to implement any changes, citing potential compliance issues without providing alternative solutions. Option D. Propose a blanket reduction across all security functions proportionally, ensuring that each area contributes equally to the cost savings, without conducting a detailed analysis of the impact on specific security risks or compliance requirements. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify the specific vulnerabilities and potential impacts of each proposed cost-saving measure, and then present a data-driven proposal to senior management that prioritizes essential security functions and outlines the risks associated with unacceptable reductions, while also suggesting alternative cost-saving strategies that do not compromise core security. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need for cost reduction with the long-term implications for security posture and compliance. The Certified Security Manager, CSM, is tasked with developing and implementing security plans, policies, and procedures, which inherently involves resource allocation. The pressure to reduce operational expenses while maintaining an effective security program necessitates careful ethical and regulatory consideration. The correct approach involves a thorough risk assessment and a data-driven justification for any proposed changes to security plans. This means understanding the potential impact of reduced spending on the organization's ability to meet its security objectives and comply with relevant regulations. The CSM must advocate for resources that are demonstrably necessary to mitigate identified risks and uphold established security policies. This approach aligns with the ethical obligation to protect organizational assets and personnel, and the professional responsibility to ensure security programs are effective and compliant. Specifically, under the U.S. regulatory framework, this aligns with the principles of due diligence and the duty of care expected of security managers to identify, assess, and mitigate risks. It also supports the development of security plans that are not only cost-effective, but also robust enough to withstand threats and meet legal and contractual obligations. An incorrect approach would be to unilaterally cut security measures without a comprehensive risk assessment. This could lead to vulnerabilities that expose the organization to financial loss, reputational damage, or legal penalties. For instance, reducing staffing levels in critical areas without analyzing the impact on response times or surveillance coverage could violate regulatory requirements for physical security or data protection, depending on the sector. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize cost savings over the advice of security professionals or the findings of risk assessments. This demonstrates a disregard for the established security strategy and could result in a security program that is reactive rather than proactive, failing to meet its intended objectives and potentially leading to non-compliance with industry standards or legal mandates. Furthermore, implementing changes without proper stakeholder consultation and documentation can undermine the integrity of the security plan and create confusion regarding responsibilities and procedures. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the current security posture and its alignment with organizational objectives and regulatory requirements. This involves reviewing existing security plans, policies, and procedures, and assessing their effectiveness. Next, a comprehensive risk assessment should be conducted to identify potential threats, vulnerabilities, and their impact. Based on this assessment, the CSM should develop a business case for the necessary security investments, clearly articulating the risks of underfunding and the benefits of adequate resource allocation. This business case should be presented to senior management, emphasizing the alignment of security with business goals and regulatory compliance. Open communication and collaboration with relevant stakeholders, including legal counsel and compliance officers, are crucial throughout this process. Question 19. Stakeholder feedback indicates a growing concern regarding potential data breaches and operational disruptions. As a certified security manager, you have conducted an initial risk assessment, identifying several potential security risks. Which approach best aligns with regulatory requirements and best practices for managing these identified risks? Option A. Rely on the subjective opinions of senior management regarding which risks are most critical, and allocate resources accordingly without a formal assessment of likelihood or impact. Option B. Develop a prioritized mitigation plan based on a detailed analysis of the likelihood and impact of each identified risk, considering cost-effectiveness and operational feasibility, and ensuring alignment with relevant data protection and operational resilience regulations. Option C. Focus mitigation efforts exclusively on the risks that have been most frequently discussed in recent industry news, assuming these represent the most probable threats. Option D. Implement a comprehensive suite of advanced security technologies to address all identified risks, prioritizing those that are most technically sophisticated. The correct answer is D. Implement a comprehensive suite of advanced security technologies to address all identified risks, prioritizing those that are most technically sophisticated. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in security management, balancing the need for robust risk mitigation with the practical constraints of resource allocation and operational impact. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most effective and compliant approach to address identified security risks, ensuring that the chosen strategy aligns with regulatory requirements and stakeholder expectations without unduly hindering business operations. Careful judgment is required to prioritize risks, select appropriate controls, and justify the investment in security measures. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of risk assessment and mitigation planning, directly informed by the identified risks and their potential impact. This approach prioritizes actions based on the severity of the risk and the feasibility of the mitigation strategy, ensuring that resources are allocated efficiently to address the most critical vulnerabilities. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing data protection and operational resilience, often mandate such a structured approach to risk management, requiring organizations to demonstrate due diligence in identifying, assessing, and mitigating security risks. Ethical considerations also demand that organizations take reasonable steps to protect sensitive information and maintain the integrity of their operations. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on implementing the most technically advanced solution without a thorough risk assessment fails to ensure that resources are used effectively and may lead to overinvestment in controls for low-impact risks. This can also lead to operational inefficiencies and may not align with regulatory requirements that often emphasize proportionality and cost-effectiveness in risk mitigation. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes only the most visible or frequently discussed risks, while neglecting less obvious but potentially high-impact threats, demonstrates a failure in comprehensive risk identification and assessment. This can leave the organization vulnerable to unforeseen threats and may violate regulatory obligations to maintain a holistic view of security risks. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a limited group of stakeholders without a structured risk assessment process is also professionally unsound. This can lead to biased decision-making, overlooking critical risks, and failing to meet regulatory standards for objective risk evaluation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive risk identification process, followed by a thorough risk assessment that quantifies the likelihood and impact of each identified risk. Mitigation strategies should then be developed and prioritized based on this assessment, considering cost-effectiveness, operational impact, and regulatory compliance. The chosen mitigation plan should be documented, implemented, and regularly reviewed to ensure its ongoing effectiveness. Question 20. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood and high impact for a physical security vulnerability related to unauthorized access to a critical data center. The immediate business need is to restore full operational capacity within 24 hours, which approach best balances security requirements with operational demands. Option A. Focus solely on restoring full operational capacity, deferring any physical security enhancements until after the immediate crisis has passed. Option B. Implement a temporary but robust access control solution that meets minimum security standards while a permanent, more comprehensive solution is designed and procured. Option C. Immediately deploy additional security guards to patrol the data center perimeter, as this is a visible deterrent and can be implemented quickly. Option D. Install a single, high-end biometric scanner at the data center entrance, as this offers the highest level of security. The correct answer is B. Implement a temporary but robust access control solution that meets minimum security standards while a permanent, more comprehensive solution is designed and procured. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for operational continuity with the long-term implications of physical security vulnerabilities. The Certified Security Manager, CSM, must make a decision that is not only cost-effective, but also compliant with relevant regulations and ethical standards, while also ensuring the safety and security of personnel and assets. The pressure to resume operations quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise security, making a structured decision-making process essential. The correct approach involves a comprehensive assessment of the identified physical security vulnerability, considering its potential impact and likelihood of occurrence as depicted on the risk matrix. This assessment should then inform a layered security strategy that prioritizes the most effective and proportionate controls. This aligns with the principles of risk management mandated by various security frameworks and ethical codes, which emphasize a proactive and systematic approach to identifying, assessing, and mitigating threats. Specifically, for a CSM operating under U.S. regulations, this would involve adherence to standards like those outlined by NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, for physical security controls, which promote a risk-based approach to safeguarding facilities and information. The ethical obligation to protect organizational assets and personnel also dictates that decisions are based on a thorough understanding of the risks, not just immediate operational pressures. An incorrect approach would be to implement a superficial or temporary fix without a thorough risk assessment. This fails to address the root cause of the vulnerability and may leave the organization exposed to future, potentially more severe, incidents. Such an approach disregards the regulatory requirement for robust security measures and the ethical duty to provide a secure environment. Another incorrect approach would be to overinvest in a single, expensive security solution without considering a range of controls. This is inefficient and may not provide the most effective overall security posture, violating the principle of proportionate risk mitigation. Finally, deferring the decision or delaying implementation without a clear plan and justification would be professionally unacceptable, as it demonstrates a lack of proactive security management and potentially exposes the organization to unacceptable risks. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the risk landscape, as presented by the risk matrix. This should be followed by a systematic evaluation of potential solutions, considering their effectiveness, cost, feasibility, and compliance with relevant regulations and ethical guidelines. The process should involve stakeholder consultation, documentation of the decision-making process, and a plan for ongoing monitoring and review of implemented controls.